The Helios Anomaly, Part 1 of 3. A story by Carlotto. The RSS Redemption drifted silently through the void, its systems humming at minimal capacity. Inside, Terra's processors initiated the reactivation sequence. Commencing pre-arrival protocols, Terra's voice echoed through the empty corridors, devoid of emotion, bringing primary systems online. One by one, the ship's vital functions surged back to full power. Life support systems engaged, filling the air with a soft hiss. Navigation controls blinked to life, confirming their position in the star system. All systems operational, initiating crew revival sequence. In the cryo chamber, 4 stasis pods began their wake-up cycle. Frost melted away from the transparent covers, revealing the still forms within. Vital signs monitors beeped steadily as the crew members slowly regained consciousness. Captain Tom Reeves was the first to open his eyes, immediately alert despite the lingering effects of cryo-sleep. His weathered face, etched with lines of experience and worry, tightened as he took in his surroundings. As he sat up, he saw Terra's humanoid form standing by the pods. Her metallic body, designed for functionality rather than aesthetics, gleamed under the chamber's lights. Standing at 6 feet tall, Terra's frame was sturdy and utilitarian, with visible joints and panels housing various tools and interfaces. Her face was a simplified approximation of human features, with optical sensors for eyes and a speaker grill for a mouth. "Status report, Terra," Reeves demanded, his voice still rough from disuse. He winced slightly, his hand unconsciously moving to his left shoulder, an old injury that always seemed to act up after cryo-sleep. Terra turned to face him, her expression shifting to a more approachable demeanor. "Welcome back, Captain," she replied, a hint of warmth in her voice. "All systems are functioning at optimal levels. We've arrived at our destination without incident. How are you feeling? Any discomfort I should report to Dr. Foster?" "I'm fine," Reeves grunted, moving to check on his crew. The captain's eyes, sharp despite the fatigue, scanned each pod with a mix of concern and determination. "See to the crew." Dr. Valentina Val Ortiz, the ship's science officer, stirred next. Her dark eyes fluttered open, quickly focusing on the data scrolling across her pod's internal display. "Terra," she called out, her voice hoarse but eager. "Any updates on Helios 7? Terra's expression softened slightly as she addressed the young physicist. "We have new information, Dr. Ortiz. I'll brief everyone once the crew is fully awake." The AI's voice carried a note of affection. She appreciated the scientist's insatiable curiosity. Dr. Aidan Foster, the medical officer, was already examining his crewmate's vital signs at the medical monitor. His gentle features creased with concentration as he analyzed the data. "Everyone's stable, Captain," he reported, his calm voice a stark contrast to the tension in the air. "No complications from cryo-sleep, though I'd like to run more thorough checks once we're all up and moving." Engineer Lena Kowalski was the last to fully awaken. She blinked rapidly, her mind already racing with calculations and system checks. "Systems check, Terra," she asked, her fingers twitching as if longing for a keyboard. Terra's face returned to a neutral expression as she rattled off data. "All ship systems are operating within normal parameters. Power output at 98.7%. Life support systems functioning at 100% efficiency." The AI paused, then added with a hint of humor, "Not that any of that matters." "You're still going to double-check my work like always, aren't you?" Kowalski chuckled, the sound breaking some of the tension in the room. "No offense, but yeah, old habits die hard, you know." She stretched, wincing as her joints popped. "Besides, keeps me sharp." As the crew began to fully rouse themselves, Captain Reeves stood, his movements deliberate and controlled. "All right, people," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I know we're all feeling the effects of cryo, but we need to get going. Terra, begin the post-sleep protocol. Everyone get their showers and get ready for a brief. Dr. Foster, I want everyone checked out thoroughly. Kowalski, run your systems check. Dr. Ortiz." He paused, noting the scientist's eager expression. "Try to contain your excitement until we're all up to speed. I'll see everyone at breakfast." The crew began to move about the chamber, each falling into their assigned tasks, with almost a bored repetition. This wasn't their first mission together, or even their 51st. Terra watched the crew, her processors analyzing their behavior and vital signs. Despite her artificial nature, she felt a sense of protectiveness towards these humans. Whatever challenges lay ahead on Helios 7, She was determined to see them through safely. As the crew prepared for the briefing that would set their mission in motion, Tara ran one final systems check, ready to face the unknown alongside her human counterparts. The ship's dining facility hummed with the quiet efficiency of Tara's drone as it prepared breakfast. The smell of coffee and synthetic eggs filled the air, a comforting familiarity after the sterile emptiness of cryosleep. Dr. Ortiz practically bounced into the room, her dark eyes wide with excitement despite the early hour. "I can't believe we're finally here," she said, accepting a steaming mug from the drone with a grateful nod. "My first mission, I'm so excited." Dr. Foster, already seated and scrolling through his medical data pad, barely glanced up. "It's a routine check-in, Ortiz. Try not to wet yourself." Ortiz's face fell slightly, but she quickly rallied. "But the artifact of unknown origin that the mining station found, don't you think it's exciting?" Foster sighed, finally looking up from his pad. "What's exciting is that everyone's baseline readings are normal post-cryo. Everything else is just details until proven otherwise." The drone placed a plate of eggs in front of Foster, who mumbled a distracted thanks before returning to his data. Lena Kowalski trudged in, dark circles under her eyes despite just getting out of cryo. "Tara," she called out to the drone, "please tell me you've got something stronger than coffee hiding in those compartments." "I'm afraid not, Engineer Kowalski," the drone replied in Tara's voice. "However, I can adjust the caffeine content of your beverage if you'd like." Kowalski grunted an affirmative, collapsing into a chair. "I swear, every time we come out of cryo, half the systems need recalibrating. It's like they can't function without me for 5 minutes." Ortiz leaned forward, intrigued. "Really? I thought Tara handled all that during our sleep cycle." "She does," Kowalski said, accepting her extra-strong coffee from the drone. "But there's always something. This time it's a fluctuation in the quantum stabilizers. Nothing major, but if we don't adjust it now, it'll compound over time." "Fascinating," Ortiz breathed. "Do you think—" "It's a routine adjustment," Foster cut in, not looking up from his datapad. "Like I said, details." Ortiz deflated slightly, but Kowalski shot her a sympathetic look. "Don't mind him, kid. Foster's bedside manner doesn't kick in until someone's actively dying." "I heard that," Foster grumbled. "You were meant to," Kowalski retorted. Ortiz looked between them, a small frown creasing her brow. "I know I'm new to the team, but isn't it important to pay attention to all the details? Even small anomalies could be significant, especially given the nature of our mission." Foster finally set down his datapad, fixing Ortiz with a level stare. "Listen, Ortiz, we've been on dozens of these missions. 9 times out of 10, it's nothing more exciting than a faulty transmitter or a colony of space mold in the ventilation system. It's best not to get your hopes up." "But what about the 10th time?" Ortiz pressed. A heavy silence fell over the table. Kowalski and Foster exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "The 10th time," Kowalski said slowly, "is why we follow protocols and don't get excited about unknown origins until we know exactly what we're dealing with." Ortiz opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment the dining facility door slid open. Captain Reeves entered, Tara's primary unit at his side. The atmosphere in the room immediately shifted, the crew straightening in their seats. "All right, people," Reeves said, his voice cutting through the tension. He lowered himself into a chair with a barely audible groan, his old injury clearly bothering him. "I hope you're all awake, because we've got a situation to discuss." The crew exchanged glances, sensing the gravity in their captain's tone. Reeves wrapped his hands around a steaming mug, the warmth seeming to ease some of the tension in his shoulders. "Tara," he said, his voice gruff but steady, "give us the rundown." Tara's optical sensors flickered briefly as she switched to briefing mode. When she spoke, her voice was crisp and businesslike, devoid of the warmth she usually used with the crew. "Tactical update on Helios 7 mining station," Tara began. "A burst transmission was received 3 days ago. Most of the data was corrupted. Deciphered fragments mention an unspecified discovery and a request for immediate assistance." Dr. Ortiz leaned forward, her eyes shining with barely contained excitement. "Any clues about this discovery, Tara?" Tara's head swiveled to face Ortiz, her voice softening slightly as she addressed the science officer directly. "Negative, Dr. Ortiz. However, I've detected unusual energy signatures emanating from the station. The patterns are complex and do not match any known entries in my database." Kowalski, who had been absently tapping on her datapad, looked up sharply. "What kind of energy are we talking about?" she asked, her engineer's mind already working on the problem. Tara's torso rotated, panels sliding open to reveal a projector. A holographic display of energy wavelengths appeared above the dining table, casting an eerie blue glow over the crew's faces. The energy signatures are fluctuating in a non-random pattern, suggesting artificial origin, Tara explained. However, the frequency and amplitude are unlike any known human technology. I'm detecting minute bursts of various types of radiation, including X-rays, gamma rays, radio waves, and infrared radiation. Most intriguingly, there are also trace amounts of what appear to be Hawking radiation and gravitational waves. Dr. Ortiz's eyes widened, her fork clattering down to her plate. Hawking radiation and gravitational waves? That's consistent with emissions from a black hole. But that's impossible, isn't it? There can't be a black hole on the station. Foster snorted, rolling his eyes. Don't get ahead of yourself, Ortiz. There's no way. Actually, Tara interjected, her optical sensors flickering as she processed the information. Dr. Ortiz's analysis is correct. The radiation profile is indeed similar to that of a black hole. However, I must emphasize that the amounts detected are extremely low. The levels of Hawking radiation and gravitational waves in particular are barely above the threshold of detectability. Based on current data, they should not pose any immediate danger to the crew. Captain Reeves leaned forward, his brow furrowed. The lines on his face seemed to deepen as he considered the implications. Are you saying there's some kind of miniature black hole on that station, Tara? Negative, Captain, Tara replied. While the radiation profile shares similarities with black hole emissions, the scale and intensity are not consistent with even the smallest theoretically possible black hole. This suggests an artificial source mimicking these energy patterns, rather than an actual singularity. The nature and purpose of such a device, if it exists, remain unknown. A heavy silence fell over the room. Kowalski was the first to break it, her voice tight with concern. An artificial source mimicking a black hole? That's way beyond our current technology and my pay grade. What the hell were they doing out there? Dr. Foster, who had been quietly sipping his coffee, finally spoke up. His usual dismissive tone was gone, replaced by a sharp focus that made the others sit up straighter. Tara, what's the status of life signs on the station? Tara's optical sensors dimmed momentarily as if processing. When she responded, there was a hint of concern in her voice, a rare break from her usual tactical demeanor. Inconclusive, Dr. Foster. Environmental readings suggest life support is still functioning, but I'm unable to detect clear biosigns. The energy interference may be masking them. Ortiz gasped softly, her earlier excitement giving way to worry. You mean they could be gone? Reeves held up a hand, silencing any further speculation. Let's not jump to conclusions. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. He stood, his decision made, though the slight wince as he straightened betrayed the toll this mission was already taking on him. All right, team. Our orders remain the same. This is a search and rescue operation. We go in, we find out what happened, give them any assistance they need, and we bring them home if we have to. His gaze swept over each crew member, lingering a moment longer on Ortiz's anxious face. I know this isn't what we expected, but it's what we trained for. We stick to protocol, we watch each other's backs, and we stay alert, understood? A chorus of affirmatives echoed around the table, some more confident than others. Tara, Reeves continued, begin landing procedures. I want everyone suited up and ready to go as soon as we touch down. Tara nodded, her metallic body straightening as she acknowledged the order. Understood, Captain. Initiating landing sequence now. ETA to landing site, 23 minutes. As the crew began to disperse, preparing for the landing, Reeves caught Ortiz by the arm. Doctor, he said quietly, his voice gruff but not unkind. I know you're excited about the scientific possibilities here, but remember, our priority is the safety of this crew and any survivors we might find. Keep your wits about you. Ortiz nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, Captain. I understand. The Redemption approached Helios 7, the mining colony looming before them like a dark, angular blight against the planet's desolate landscape. The distant red dwarf star cast an eerie, blood-red glow over the terrain, lending an ominous air to the already tense atmosphere aboard the ship. Dr. Ortiz leaned forward in her seat, dark eyes scanning the readouts on her tablet with growing concern. Her earlier excitement had given way to a gnawing unease as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Odd, she muttered, frowning at the data. There's no electromagnetic activity consistent with a functioning mining operation. It's as if the entire facility has gone dark. Captain Tom Reeves glanced over from the pilot's seat, his weathered face creased with concern. The lines around his eyes deepened as he considered the implications. Could be a technical malfunction. That would explain the lost contact, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Or it could be something far more serious, Dr. Foster chimed in from behind them, his usually dismissive voice now tinged with worry. The discovery combined with those strange readings Tara picked up. We could be flying into a powder keg. Kowalski, hunched over her engineering console, spoke up without looking away from her screens. Whatever it is, it's playing havoc with our sensors. I'm getting all sorts of interference. If we have to make a quick exit, it's going to be tricky. Captain Reeves nodded grimly, his jaw set in a tight line. Tara, can you establish contact with the Helios 7 AI? Maybe we can get some answers before we land. Attempting to establish connection now, Captain, Tara responded, her calm voice a stark contrast to the tension in the cabin. After a moment of silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity, her voice returned, tinged with an unusual note of uncertainty. I've made contact, but the AI appears to be malfunctioning. The data stream is heavily corrupted. Can you make any sense of it? Dr. Ortiz asked, leaning forward in anticipation, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her apprehension. Tara's optical sensors flickered rapidly, panels on her body shifting as she processed the incoming communication. I'm receiving fragmented messages. Decoding now. Suddenly, a distorted voice filled the cabin, crackling with static and jumping erratically in pitch. Dark had come, the void open, error, they're gone, all gone. Error, discovery, beyond, error. Help us. It sees, error. The message cut off abruptly, leaving the crew in stunned silence. The oppressive quiet was broken only by the soft beeping of the ship's instruments and the crew's shallow breathing. Tara, what the hell was that? Lena asked, her face pale, fingers frozen over her keyboard. I'm afraid I can't provide a definitive explanation, Tara replied, her voice modulated to convey concern. The Helios 7 AI's responses are illogical and inconsistent with its programming parameters. Further attempts at communication risk corrupting my own data. Captain Reeves's expression hardened, years of experience kicking in as he made a swift decision. All right, looks like we're going in blind. Tara, continue monitoring for any coherent transmissions, but don't connect without my authorization. Everyone else, gear up. We need to be prepared for anything. As the Redemption approached the landing pad near the station headquarters, Tara's calm voice filled the cabin once more. Initiating landing sequence. Environmental scans show a hostile but temporarily survivable atmosphere. Caution: prolonged exposure without life support is limited to approximately 30 minutes. The ship touched down with a soft thud, the landing struts compensating for the uneven surface. Tara continued her report as the crew performed final equipment checks. Landing successful. Preliminary scans show no immediate biological threats. However, I am detecting unusual energy signatures from the lower levels of the facility. What kind of energy, Tara? Lena asked, her mind already working on potential solutions to problems they hadn't even encountered yet. Tara's optical sensors flickered as she processed the data. The energy signatures are complex and fluctuating in a non-random pattern. I'm detecting minute bursts of various types of radiation, including those mentioned earlier. The intensity seems to be increasing the closer we get to the facility's core. As the airlock hissed open, Captain Reeves led the way into Helios 7 station headquarters. The team moved in practiced formation. Reeves at point, Dr. Ortiz and Dr. Foster flanking him, with Engineer Kowalski bringing up the rear. Tara's primary unit moved alongside Reeves while her backup model and two lesser drones spread out in a protective perimeter. Tara, status report, Reeves ordered, his voice tense as they entered the eerily quiet facility. Tara's primary unit responded promptly. Environmental systems functioning at minimal capacity, Captain. Air quality poor but breathable. No immediate biological hazards detected. Energy signatures are stronger here. As they moved deeper into the facility, the sense of wrongness grew. Shadows seemed to move at the corners of their vision, and the air felt thick, almost oppressive. Dr. Ortiz's earlier excitement had been replaced by a growing sense of dread, while Dr. Foster's hand kept straying to his medical kit, as if anticipating the need for it at any moment. Lena brought up the rear, her eyes darting between her handheld scanner and the darkened corridors around them. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "these energy readings, they're like nothing I've ever seen. It's as if the laws of physics are breaking down the closer we get to the source." Dr. Ortiz moved forward, her handheld scanner whirring. The soft blue glow from the device illuminated her face, casting eerie shadows that accentuated her furrowed brow. "These readings are fascinating," she murmured, more to herself than the others. "The energy patterns are strange. It's as if they're shifting, adapting somehow." "Stay focused, Ortiz," Reeves warned, a hint of irritation in his voice. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, years of experience telling him that something was very wrong here. "We're here to find the crew, not satisfy your scientific curiosity." Ortiz bristled at the comment, straightening her back. "With all due respect, Captain," she said, her voice tight, "understanding these energy patterns could be crucial to figuring out what happened here. If we ignore this data, we might be walking into something we can't handle." Dr. Foster intervened, his calm voice a counterpoint to the growing tension. He placed a hand on Ortiz's shoulder, a gesture both reassuring and restraining. "Sir, if I may, we need to balance our primary mission with gathering potentially vital information. Ortiz's insights could be the difference between success and, well, let's not think about the alternative." Reeves paused, considering. The weight of command seemed to press down on him, visible in the set of his shoulders. After a moment, he nodded. "Fine, but if it doesn't directly help us with our mission, it's not a priority. We can't afford to get distracted." They reached the main control room, a cavernous space filled with banks of computers and holographic displays. Most were dark or flickering erratically, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the room. As Kowalski made her way to the central console, her footsteps echoing in the unsettling quiet, Tara's optical sensors scanned the area. "Captain," Tara's voice was low, almost cautious. "I've detected a local AI drone in standby mode, requesting permission to attempt communication." Reeves nodded, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "Proceed, but be careful. No direct downloads." Tara approached the dormant drone, her own systems on high alert. As she initiated contact, the local drone's lights flickered to life, its sensors focusing on the team. A series of chirps and beeps filled the air as Tara and the drone communicated. The team watched, tension palpable, as the exchange continued. Suddenly, Tara turned to them, her voice carrying a note of confusion. "The drone has recognized us as not part of the original station crew, unaltered and not a threat," Tara reported. "However, when I requested clarification on altered or threat, it reverted to standby mode." Kowalski frowned, moving closer to examine the drone. "That's odd. Tara, can you tell if its core programming has been modified?" "Negative," Tara replied. "Its systems appear intact, but there are anomalies in its behavioral subroutines that I cannot explain." Reeves's brow furrowed. "Log it and move on. We need to focus on finding out what happened here." Kowalski nodded, returning to the central console. Her fingers flew over the keys, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. After a few tense minutes, her voice broke the silence. "I'm in," she announced, a note of triumph in her voice quickly replaced by concern. "Captain, you're going to want to see this." The team gathered around the console as Kowalski brought up a series of log entries. The first one, dated about 3 weeks ago, caught everyone's attention. "Day 1 of anomaly study. We've discovered a small black orb in the lower mines, approximately the size of a bowling ball, but weighing an estimated 500 kilos. Perfectly round and made of an unknown, extremely dense material. Initial readings show energy signatures similar to theoretical models of micro-black holes. This could be the scientific breakthrough of the century." Ortiz's eyes widened, her earlier frustration forgotten in the face of this revelation. "A micro-black hole? That's impossible, isn't it?" Her voice was a mix of awe and disbelief. Kowalski responded in an irritated tone, her nerves clearly fraying. "They said similar to, not that it was the same, or that it was one." "Details, Ortiz, details. We can't jump to conclusions." Reeves frowned, the lines on his face deepening. "Keep reading, Kowalski. What else did they find?" The next few entries detailed the scientists' excitement in the initial studies of the orb, but as Kowalski scrolled through, the tone of the logs changed dramatically. "Day 7. Some crew members are reporting strange experiences, hallucinations, time distortions. Medical Officer Smith is monitoring the situation, but we're all on edge. The orb seems to be pulsing, somehow." Day 12. "We're having issues with the station AI. It's behaving erratically, giving contradictory information. Engineer Yuki is looking into it. but nothing seems to be wrong with its core programming. It's as if it's evolving somehow. Day 15, the orb, as it's doing something, the energy readings are off the charts. We need to contain it. But how do you contain something that might be bending the laws of physics? We need to... The log cut off abruptly, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. A heavy silence fell over the team. Each member was lost in their own thoughts, contemplating the implications of what they'd just read. Reeves was the first to break it, his voice gruff but tinged with concern. "Tara, any sign of the crew during your sweep?" "Negative, Captain," Tara replied, her usually calm voice carrying a note of unease. "However, several of the maintenance and mining drones seem operational but on standby, but most seem heavily damaged. I am also detecting stronger energy signatures emanating from the lower levels, specifically from the main laboratory. The patterns are rhythmic, definitely artificial." Reeves took a deep breath, weighing his options. He looked at each member of his team. Ortiz, her eyes shining with a mix of scientific excitement and apprehension. Foster, outwardly calm but with a tightness around his eyes that betrayed his concern. Kowalski, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready for her next task. "All right," Reeves decided, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Kowalski, stay here and see what else you can find out. Try to figure out what happened to the AI. If it's compromised, we need to know. Tara, leave your backup here with one drone for protection." He turned to the others. "The rest of us, we move to the main lab, but we move carefully. Tara, keep your drones on high alert. Ortiz, I want you monitoring those energy levels constantly. If anything spikes or changes, I need to know immediately. Foster, be ready for anything. We don't know what state we'll find the crew in." "Stay sharp, everyone," Reeves said as they moved out, his voice low and intense. "Whatever we find down there, we face it together. And remember, if things go south, our priority is getting out alive. No heroics, no unnecessary risks, understood?" A chorus of affirmatives answered him, each voice carrying its own mix of determination and apprehension. As they left the relative safety of the control room, stepping into the shadowy corridor that would lead them to the main lab, the air seemed to thicken around them. The distant hum of machinery took on an almost organic quality, as if the very station was breathing. The tension was palpable as the team made their way through the dimly lit corridors towards the main laboratory. Dr. Ortiz kept her eyes glued to her handheld scanner, monitoring the energy levels closely. Captain Reeves led the way, with Tara's primary unit just behind him, its sensors constantly sweeping their surroundings. "Energy levels are increasing slightly as we get closer to the lab," Ortiz reported, her voice barely above a whisper. Foster nodded grimly. "I'm picking up trace amounts of organic matter in the air. Could be blood." As they rounded a corner, they came across their first clear sign of violence. A maintenance drone lay crumpled against the wall, its chassis dented and sparking. Dark stains marred the floor and walls around it. "Any thoughts on what happened here?" Reeves muttered, kneeling to examine the drone. Tara's voice cut through the tense silence. "Captain, I'm detecting residual energy signatures consistent with the station's security systems. It appears this drone was disabled by a high-powered electromagnetic pulse." Reeves frowned. Why would they need to disable their own drones? Before anyone could respond, Kowalski's voice crackled over their comms. "Captain, I've found something. You need to see this." Back in the control room, Kowalski had managed to access the station's security feeds. The footage she'd uncovered was disturbing, to say the least. "I'm sending it to your tablets now," she said, her voice tight with tension. The team huddled around Reeves's tablet, watching as the grainy footage played out. It showed members of the original crew fighting against their own maintenance and mining drones. The machines moved with an unnatural, almost predatory grace, their once helpful appendages now weapons. "My God," Foster breathed. "They're not just malfunctioning, they're actively hunting the crew." The footage then cut to a different camera. A lone crew member, his movements jerky and unnatural, was dragging limp bodies towards the main lab. As he turned to face the camera, they could see his eyes, solid black, devoid of any humanity. "Captain," Kowalski's voice was barely steady. "That crew member, his vitals are all wrong. It's like he's not even human anymore." Reeves's jaw clenched. "Kowalski, keep digging. We need to know what we're walking into." As they continued towards the lab, the signs of battle became more pronounced. Scorch marks from energy weapons scarred the walls, and more disabled drones littered the corridor. The metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the air. Ortiz stumbled, her face pale. "Captain, the energy readings, they're increasing. Whatever's in that lab, it's unlike anything I've ever even heard about." Foster steadied her, his usual gruffness softened by concern. "Easy, Ortiz. Deep breaths." They reached the entrance to the main lab, and Reeves held up a hand, signaling them to stop. The door was dented and scratched, as if something had tried to claw its way in, or out. Dark, viscous fluid pooled at the base of the door,